Hello and welcome to the Mindful Evolution Podcast. I'm Leah Drew, your host and mind-body healing guide. This podcast is for the awareness seeker ready to go deeper, create change, and feel more empowered over their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. My intention is to be a catalyst for you as we explore topics surrounding holistic health, mindset optimization, trauma healing, emotional intelligence, and much more. I'm so grateful to have you here and to support you as we evolve in mind, body, and spirit. Let's breathe in and out. Now, let's dive in. So I just got off a call with one of my one-on-one clients, and we dove really deep today into generational trauma and generational patterns that are continuing to play out in not just her life, but also in the life of her daughters. And it is such an honor to support this individual, this beautiful woman, as she dives deeper into her work a little bit later on in her life. And we talked about the importance of what she's doing and the power in what she's doing, because not only does it get to change her life, but it also gets to create shifts and changes in her daughters' lives and in all of the children to come in her generation and her future generations, I should say. And so today we really looked at the patterns that were playing and brought awareness to that. And one of the things that I helped her understand was how she is personally influenced genetically and energetically by not just her life, but also the life of her mother and her grandmother. And when we look at generational trauma, it's really important to look at the 3 generations prior to the one that you're currently living. So you, your mother, your grandmother, or you, your father, your grandfather. And this is the case, especially, and I'm going to highlight women here, especially for women, because what happens for you, the individual listening to this podcast right now, for you, if you are a woman, or if you're associated with a woman, you know a woman, I'm assuming you do. For women, your eggs are actually carried, created, generated while your grandmother is carrying your mother in her womb. So as your grandmother creates and carries your mother in the womb, your mother is at that point actually carrying all of the eggs in which you will have in your lifetime. Women are only born with so many eggs. And those eggs are generated at the moment that your mother is being created in your grandmother's womb. And so your grandmother is actually carrying your embryonic eggs that will be used in the future for you to create children. And so when we talk about generational trauma, what this means is that all of the things that your grandmother has experienced in her lifetime, or all the things that she's being affected by based on her mother and her grandmother, are actually influencing you through the genetics of your eggs, which again are being carried in your mother while she's being created in your grandmother's womb. And so energetically speaking, all these things that are happening and being experienced by your grandmother are influencing your eggs, and therefore are energetically influencing you. And when we talk about epigenetics, we talk about how your gene expression is influenced by these generational experiences, one, but specifically triggered by the experiences that you're living in your lifetime. So what does that mean? Epigenetics is the study of your environment and how it affects genetic expression. So therefore, if there is something that's happening in your lifetime that is reminiscent of something that's happened in your grandmother's lifetime, a pattern, a belief, an experience, it's going to continue to lead to the genetic expression of, well, we should say the expression of a particular gene, right? So you can be given these genetics. You are given these genetics, but what happens in your environment, internally and externally, is going to affect how that gene is expressed. So when we take a look at generational trauma, it's important to look at the patterns that occurred throughout these generations so that we can come to an awareness of what it is that is influencing your genetic expression, so that you can put a stop to the pattern, so that you can put a stop to that genetic expression or the expression of that gene, and so that you can work on healing these particular things within yourself and within your lifetime and within your set of genes, so that you can better support the future generations to come. And so today in this session with a client, we got to look at this pattern of mothers in her lineage being unable to mourn the loss of their children and brushing that under the rug and not being able to mourn with the partner that they had that was responsible for creating that child with the female. And we got to see and look at how this pattern was replaying itself from her grandmother's generation to her mother's generation to her generation and even into her daughter's generation. And the more we discussed this, the more we got to the point that she reflected on the fact that there was a really big thing that she had never told either of her children that seemed to her to be playing a role in continuing this pattern of brushing under the rug this thing that had happened with an unborn child or a stillborn child that was never spoken about. It was kept hidden. It was kept from others that ultimately prevented others from being able to mourn and being able to support that female. And as we continued to dive deeper into this conversation, one of the things that I reflected back to her was something that we spoke about at the very, very beginning of our work together. And one of the big challenges that this client specifically came to me with was not being able to show her emotions and feeling like when she did show her emotions that it would lead to others seeing her as weak. And really this suppression of her emotions because she felt like she needed to show up. She felt like she had things to take care of. She felt like she couldn't show these emotions to her family, to her daughters, to anyone involved because it would prevent her from being able to be seen as that strong feminine woman, to be seen as someone that could be trusted, to be seen as someone that could show up. And I brought this back up to her with some quotes that she had expressed to me at the very beginning of our work together, and she just broke down in tears and in awe. And for the first time in her life, she was able to see this pattern, and she was able to make these connections around the way in which she has challenges around showing up in her present life with some of the experiences that her previous generations had navigated, that her mom and her grandmother had been challenged around. And she was able to see how those things that her mother and her grandmother were challenged by were actually things that were continuing to rear their head into her life now. And the beautiful and powerful part about coming to the awareness of these generational patterns is the recognition that you get to make a change, that you get to create a different and forge a different pathway to prevent particular genes from being expressed in a particular way through awareness and understanding is powerful. And oftentimes we don't fully understand why we have these challenges or why this thing is coming up in our life until we start to look at what happened in our parents' lives. What did our mothers and our fathers go through? What did our grandfathers and our grandmothers go through? And it's such an honor to be able to be a catalyst for others, specifically this client today, in that journey of coming to the awareness of this pattern that was weaved through her generations. And she said to me, she said, no one in all my years of therapy has ever brought this to the surface, has ever reflected this back to me. And when we prevent our emotions from being seen, when we prevent others from seeing us, when we prevent others from being able to understand what it is that we're going through, when we hold something back from another, when we withhold and we brush it under the rug, it prevents not only us from being able to fully process it, but also those around us from being able to fully process. And the importance of processing our emotions is huge, because when we do not process those emotions, that's what leads to the generational trauma. That's what leads to that thread continuing to weave through future generations. That's what leads to us experiencing chronic disease, chronic inflammation. When we do not allow ourselves to process these emotions, that energy creates a domino effect. Physically, mentally, emotionally, energetically, physiologically, genetically. It has an effect. And so I encourage you to take a step back and look at the things that you have not shared with the world around you, that you have not told anyone, that you have brushed under the rug, that you have not allowed yourself to fully process. Loss does not have to look like death. Loss can look like change. It can look like transition. It can look like shift. It's part of the death cycle. It's such an important part of living is dying. And again, not necessarily actually dying as a person, like physically dying, but the death of what once was. And when we don't mourn and celebrate and honor the death cycle, it becomes really challenging to fully experience the life cycle. And, I can speak personally. One of the things that has been a challenge for me throughout my life is this, and this is something that I've deeply unraveled more recently in an ayahuasca ceremony. I came to understand that I have this fear of not being heard. And that ties back to my 8-year-old self, this little girl that felt like she needed to be so loud and so exuberant and create this big scene to make sure that she was heard and that she was seen, because she feared that if she wasn't seen and heard by the parents around her at the time and the people around her at the time who were preoccupied with trying to navigate their own emotional health and wellness, this 8-year-old feared that if she was not seen and heard, that she would just disappear into the universe and disappear into the ethers. And recently I came to learn more about my father's side of the family, and I came to learn more about how voice has been so suppressed throughout my father's side of the family and throughout my generations and throughout my lineage. And how there were so many really challenging experiences that couldn't be spoken about, that couldn't be talked about. abuse, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. There were so many things that were suppressed and that reared its head and expressed itself through my grandfather, who I remember as really just being a vegetable in a hospital bed for 10 plus years. My grandfather experienced really significant dementia and Alzheimer's. And he couldn't speak. He couldn't say anything for 10 to 13 years. And can you just imagine for a second not being able to be heard for that long, not being able to speak to anybody about what's happening inside of you for that long? And it was almost like this intense experience of what all of his previous generations had been through. He was expressing, in my opinion, from what I'm observing, that lack of voice, right? That suppression of the voice. I remember going to see him as a young girl in his hospital bed, and we used to bring him peppermint patties, and he used to have this really funny way of chewing the peppermint patties because he didn't have any teeth and he couldn't speak. But it stimulated him, being able to taste through his mouth, through that place that he wanted to express and couldn't. It stimulated him, and you could see what happened as that chakra, right? That throat chakra was being stimulated. And things could go in, but things couldn't come out. And so as I've come to understand a lot of these patterns of my family, I've come to recognize why I've had some of the challenges in my life that I have around speaking up and using my voice and being clear and doing it from my light side and not my shadow side, and not from a triggered place, but a place of understanding and awareness. And the first part of any healing journey is awareness. It's so important. If you do not have awareness, you cannot create and facilitate change. And so it was truly an honor today to support my client as she came to understand and build awareness around these patterns and bring a sense of empowerment, help her find, I should say, a sense of empowerment, because I'm not doing anything for her other than being a mirror and asking her questions and holding a space for her to share. I'm driving her deeper into herself. And she, through that, gets to find the empowerment and make a choice to create the change that feels right for her. And so it truly was an honor today to help her go deeper into some of these generational patterns. It was truly an honor to help her bring a sense of mindfulness to her experience and make connections to the past, to her mother and her grandmother's experience. And it was truly an honor to witness her in her evolution of self, to not only bring a better experience into her lifetime, but also support her daughters in bringing a better experience to them. Guys, when we choose to dive into the work, to support and opt into helping the healing of our previous generations, to those that did not have the awareness and the capacity to dive into that themselves. When we opt into that, it creates massive changes in our genetics and the energetic ripple effects. And one of the things that we spoke about was the influence that this was having on her daughter at the time, and the potential of this pattern preventing her daughter from being able to bring a child into this world and being able to foster a safe environment for that child to thrive. And so as this client sat in the middle of this timeline and saw her mother and her grandmother behind her and her daughter and her future grandchild in front of her. She stepped into this empowered state of being where she chose to step forward with a change to support the future generations to come, to support her daughters that are currently here and her future grandchildren. Today was a really powerful session. Probably one of the most powerful sessions I've ever had with a client. And it's an honor to be such a catalyst in the journey of others, in the enhanced awareness of others, and supporting others with making such powerful changes. So I encourage you to, take a step back, to become the observer and to witness what it is that you're finding challenge with in your lifetime. And I encourage you to look at the lives of your mother and your father and your grandmother and your grandfather and take a look at, with an open mind and an open heart, observe and think about what challenges might they have faced. What was the life like that they had? How young were they when they had children? What was their emotional capacity at the time? And how might that be influencing and affecting you, your genetic expression, and the life that you're living right now? How you feel internally and externally. How it affects the suppression of particular things in your own self. How it affects the challenges that you navigate on a daily basis. Because if you can start to bring awareness to these things, you can start to create that massive shift in that internal environment and in that external environment. Guys, this is the work. It is not easy. It is not necessarily simple, but it is the work. And please, please, please remember that by you opting into the work, it changes the entire world within you and around you. But you always get to make that choice. You always get to choose to opt in. You always get to choose to make the change. And it's powerful when you do. It changes your life. And I personally can speak on that. Years ago, I chose to opt into the work for my mother, for my father, for my grandmother, my grandfather. Bless their souls. And I chose to do that for my future generations, for my current life experience, and it has changed my entire life. I would not be where I am today had I not opted into the work years ago. And I hope that through hearing some of this, it inspires you to want to go deeper into your work, to want to make that greater change, not just in your direct community, but in the greater community around you, in society, in the environment. And if you're in that space and you're feeling like, wow, this sounds really intriguing to me, and I feel really like I'm ready to go deeper into some of my work to heal myself, to help with healing some of the things that were never addressed in my past, that are continuing to create this thread and this cord and weave through my generations. If you're feeling ready to explore that, I would love to speak with you. I would love to book a connection call with you, a free connection call, and chat a little bit more about the challenges that you're navigating in your life and how those are affecting your world. Talk about what it could look like to dive into the work and to create a shift in your internal and external environment. So if that's something that you're feeling called to, if you'd like to explore what it might look like to work with me or to dive into your work with someone else that may feel in more alignment with you, I'm happy to make those connections if that is the case. But reach out to me, send me an email. You can email me at leah@mindbodywithleah.com. Or you can hop onto my website, www.leahdrew.com, and you can book a free call with me at the top of the page. Guys, this is powerful work. And I guarantee you that when you opt into that, when you're ready, it will massively and drastically change your life. And being here and listening to this, that's a start. So I honor you. I'm so proud of you for keeping an open mind and keeping an open heart and being open and willing to look at these parts of yourself, because it's not easy. And by doing so and sharing what you're doing with the people around you, you are leading as an example. And I'm really, really proud of you for that. So I hope to hear from you. Please reach out if you'd like to chat more about what it could look like to work one-on-one with me and go deeper into some of your healing work, to go deeper into your mindset and your beliefs and your thoughts, and optimize your healing in mind, body, and spirit, to create a change in your genetic expression and to create a change for your children and the future generations to come. I'm sending you love. You are doing an absolutely amazing job. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in with me today and for continuing to opt in to your inner work. If you found value in this conversation, please share it on social media or with someone you know that values both healing and growth. And I'd also like to invite you to join the Holistic Healing Tribe. This is my private community full of self-healers who are on a mission to optimize their physical, mental, and emotional well-being. Click the link in the show notes to join the tribe. And when you join, I'll send you my favorite things that have made the biggest impact on my health, my healing, and my growth. And finally, if you're anything like me and deeply care about seeing a more mindful approach to human evolution, please leave a review to help us reach more listeners and make a bigger impact on the world around you.